Our first speaker, Hunter Morrison, is Senior Fellow in Urban Studies at Cleveland State's Levin College of Urban Affairs and Senior Advisor to the Northeast Ohio Sustainable Communities Consortium, a regional public-private partnership dedicated to making this region more vibrant, resilient, and sustainable. Mr. Morrison has served as director of the Youngstown State University Center for Urban and Regional Studies, where he managed the Youngstown 2010 Plan, and as planning director for the city of Cleveland, where he was responsible for Cleveland's Civic Vision 2000 downtown and citywide plans. Both plans received National Planning Awards. Please join me in welcoming Hunter Morrison.
Thank you very much. I'm going to briefly tonight go through about 3 years worth of work, about $7 million worth of work that looked at a region a bit smaller in population than your own, but one that is the size and population of the state of Connecticut, Northeast Ohio, a 12-county region with 4 metropolitan areas: Cleveland, Akron, Canton, and the Youngstown, Warren area of the Mahoning Valley. These 12 counties came together. Their 4 metropolitan planning organizations came together with the support of the federal government to produce a broad framework for our future that was based on engagement across this 12-county region. The use of scenario planning and fiscal impact analysis to try to take not only the ideas, but to apply those to what the dollars and cents are of our shared future, and develop a framework for action that our individual communities, and there are about 700 taxing jurisdictions, about 400 separate communities in our region, they can use to move forward together. Let's take a minute and look at the regional trends. We look back 20 years and look forward another 30 to see where we're headed. It's not a dissimilar story to your own. We have the core cities that have been emptying out. The edges of our communities have been experiencing growth. What we're seeing, however, is this pattern across the region is weakening the region's local tax bases, increasing our overall infrastructure costs, increasing our household transportation costs, and providing fewer and fewer options other than an automobile. But again, as in your own situation, there's a supply and demand mismatch. And if we move forward, the trend suggests that Northeast Ohio will have a population growth of less than 100,000 people, but will build 250,000 new units over the next 30 years, leaving behind 175,000 units of surplus housing. Those need to be repaired or demolished. If we assume that all of those houses are demolished, we're going to be taking down 6,500 units a year at $10,000 a pop. That's $65 million a year our region's communities are going to have to raise year in and year out. It's not about TARP. It's not about an emergency situation. This is a chronic condition of cities like ours and cities like yours and regions like ours. What's different from this, in this framework than many of the other planning efforts I've worked on is we took the broad picture and the maps and the ideas and applied the numbers to them. We were able to look at the fiscal impact of on our 700 taxing jurisdictions. To the left, you see that those communities, and they're bunched into the 12 counties, are basically in balance, and that's because the state of Ohio Constitution requires that all of those jurisdictions balance their budget every year. Some are below the line, they're experiencing fiscal stress. Some are above the line, but they're all basically in balance. But going out to 2040, we see that the cost over revenues is going to provide a downward pressure of almost 34% across the region. Some of our communities are going to be way down. We'll get into that. But the best performing community, the best performing county in 2040 is worse off than today's worst performing county. This is hitting everyone. Again, the high cost of infrastructure as we expand the high cost of abandonment, where we are abandoning not just houses, but neighborhoods with established and communities with established infrastructure footprints, which we still have to maintain. So we took all this information in a very ambitious program of public engagement across the 12 counties. We did statistical polling where we asked people, should we be investing in existing communities, and found across the region an overwhelming proportion said yes. We asked the same set of questions at our individual meetings, and we found that there was an overwhelming desire across the region among the participants in the meetings to get more focus on inward development, more focus on compact development. We also used online tools, a tool called Imagine My Neo that allowed people to be planners for a day and to poll them through that. We got the same results. We did visual preference surveys and said, where should we invest? And 95% of the participants said, invest in our established communities, invest in our first suburbs, invest in our cities and towns. Our legacy cities like Detroit, cities like Cleveland, cities like Akron led the pack. Not to say that people weren't concerned with the other suburbs, but they really were concerned across the region with what's happening to the communities they know and love. We asked them in mapping exercises. We collected about 600 maps. We put them together. We found, again, that people said, invest in the core, invest in our cities, invest in the suburbs, continue to expand at the edges, but not at the expense of our farmland, not at the expense of our rural communities. A very strong bias towards a more compact and more connected form of development. We presented that, again, to the community. We looked at the trend, which is over at the left, lower left, and we said, well, what happens if we grow the same in the same pattern? What if we match the national growth rate? Where do we head? And really, what happens if we listen to ourselves and do things differently, with and without growth? We looked at those 4 scenarios. And what we found was that 4 scenarios had very different outcomes, particularly as you see at the lower level. When we do things differently, we have less abandonment. And when we do things differently, again, at the far end of the chart, we see our numbers go from the minus column to the plus column across the region. We see moving from a 34% negative balance to about a 14% positive balance. Most of our communities do far better by seeing more balance in the development. So does our environment. So does our farmland. So does our watersheds. We presented that information again in a round of meetings around the communities to determine what should our future course be. And from that process, we developed 8 vision objectives, 4 themes, 9 recommendations, and 41 specific initiatives that communities can adopt. And we made a very key point here that we're a home rule state, as I believe Michigan is, not one size fits all. The responsibility for implementation vests at the local government, the county government, at the metropolitan planning organizations. The decision to implement is the decision of the people elected to do that and their constituents. But what were the overarching vision objectives? First and foremost, promote investment in our established communities. And the second, and it ties into Dan's point about job sprawl, which is a singular problem in Northeast Ohio as well, promote equity, opportunity, and economic competitiveness by improving access to the region's employment centers. If we do nothing else, connecting the region, connecting our people to the jobs that are available is one of the most important things we can do to improve our economic performance. So we boiled that again down into 4 broad themes: strengthening our established communities, increasing our transportation choices, protecting our natural resources across the region. We have 2 watersheds, one to the lake, one to Lake Erie, to the lake system, one to the Ohio River and the Mississippi River system. We divide that into 12 soil and water groups and 3 water quality groups. We need to deal with this regionally, and we need to continue to promote collaboration and efficiency. And we lay that out in a way that really graphically suggests a much tighter, more compact, more focused, more connected. We call it quality connected places. Preserving and protecting and understanding our rich agricultural land is an economic asset, not just land for future development. We took that down to what Daniel Berneman called the noble diagram, which suggested how the pieces would fit together, and pointed out in the lower left some of the key shared assets. Our Western Reserve towns, a unique urban form that goes back to the Connecticut settlers, innovation zones around our state and private universities, cultural districts, both existing and emerging, our industrial waterfronts, which are both industrial in quality and recreation, and essential to our industrial base, and new industrial opportunity sites, which are basically brownfields reconceptualized because they've got the infrastructure. Clean them up, put jobs back on them. What's going on here? They're not to be walked away from, they're to be used. About less than 2% of our land in Northeast Ohio is industrial. That's the big picture. But as I said, action takes place at the local level, and in fact, most people cannot conceive of an area the size of the state of Connecticut with all these different jurisdictions. How do we break it down? We broke it down to the metro and county reports, working with our 4 metropolitan planning organizations. This is one in Greater Cleveland, NOACA, reports that their executive director is working with her constituents on, and taking it down to boiling it down to say, well, what's going on in Cuyahoga County? That's the mother load county. That's the center of Cleveland. Well, what's happening in Cuyahoga County? Same thing happening here. That we're seeing significant abandonment. We're seeing the pattern that many communities are seeing is the African American population leaving from the traditional communities in the city to the suburbs, leaving large areas of land behind around our cultural institutions. That's a very serious problem. Half of those abandoned properties are likely to take place in Cuyahoga County. That is getting people to pay some attention to what is going on now and into the future. But it's not just happening in Cleveland. It's not just Cuyahoga County. It's at every one of our 7 legacy cities. It's affecting each one of our 12 counties. How can we collaborate to get ahead of this? How can we lobby together at the state level and the federal level? But the change is taking place, again, across our region. And again, when we break it out, Cuyahoga County, which is the mother county, goes from a very positive balance to a -60 balance. But if we take the land that's being abandoned and build back on it, it goes to a +15. These are things that policymakers can relate to, not to the big picture, but down to what's going on in my jurisdiction. How does it affect my community? So again, we break it down, we lay out some tools about how to look at the areas being abandoned as asset risk areas, the areas that are threatened as strategic investment areas, the areas that we're expanding into and adding infrastructure. Those are not just sprawl, we call that cost risk areas. We're adding costs to our limits. That's the big picture. It was adopted in February 2014 by unanimous vote across the region. It's being implemented in a variety of ways, some with enthusiasm, some with a great deal of caution. But it received the National Award for the best community plan, and it's up to us to carry it out. And I hope, Dan, this tees up. Look how one region is attempting to craft a common vision or a shared vision, which over the next 20, 30, 40 years, we will execute. Thank you.
Our next speaker, Michael Ford, is Chief Executive Officer of the Regional Transit Authority of Southeast Michigan. Michael has more than 30 years' experience with leadership roles in both public and private transportation. Prior to coming to the RTA, he was the CEO at the Ann Arbor Area Transportation Authority and the Director of Transportation Operations for TriMet, the Portland Area Transportation Service. He has also authored books to help the refugee and immigrant populations, many of which are in a variety of languages, to help provide access to vital resources. Michael has served in leadership roles on several boards of international, national, and local organizations. Ladies and gentlemen, Michael Ford.
Thank you, and thank you for having me here tonight. What I want to talk to you a little bit about is the RTA and what we're doing and why regional transportation is extremely important. You've heard that being mentioned in many of the discussions, but the RTA obviously was formed for a reason, and one was to ensure regional connections, so make sure you can get there from here. And that's what we have. We have a community, a Southeast Michigan area that's not connected. So that means that people can't get to jobs, people can't get to the hospital, people can't even get out of their own neighborhoods. So one of the major focuses right now is creating a vision for the future, but also what can we do right now? The other thing that we have to do is come up with a funding base. And we need to do that by November of 16. So we are on a very extreme timeline to try to get things done. I don't have a presentation up here, by the way, so I just wanted to make sure you understood that. So what we have to do, is create a vision. We have to create a plan. We've been out over the last 6 months getting involvement from the communities in all 4 counties, Oakland, Macomb, Wayne, Washtenaw, and the city of Detroit, hearing what people have to say. Also working with our providers, DDOT, SMART, AAATA, and the People Mover to create a plan that we can come back to you in the next month or so with a preferred option about what we're hearing. I've met with many, many people, and people are saying, I can't get out of my community, I can't get to fresh food, I can't get to a job, I can't even get to education because I'm stuck in my community because there's no way to get where I need to go. So those are the things that are going to be resonating as we move forward and how we address that. We need to come up with a solution. So in some of the elements that we're thinking about for the regional master plan based on community involvement and providers is more direct service, later night service, cross-functional routes or cross-county routes to get you where you need to go so you're not having to wait, less transferring and more direct service. better paratransit service for elderly and disabled. People want to be able to age in place and get where they want to go. We have millennials leaving in droves because there's not good transportation where they want to live. They want to live in densely populated areas, and without good transportation, they're not going to continue to stay here. So this is really about our future, where we want to go, where we want to be. And I say all this to say this is not just theory. I've seen it happen. Most of my transfer experience is in Seattle, where I was born, but I also worked in Portland. And as an 18-year-old college student, I got my entry of transportation as a janitor for Greyhound, and I saw almost everything from the ground up, from dumping garbage cans to mopping floors. But what I was very keenly aware of, there was a vision back then about what was going on, what needed to happen. And it reminds me of the situation right now where people weren't getting where they needed to go. And what I saw were a lot of construction going on, a vision for the future. People were just tired of not being able to get where they were. One person just said they were just tired of being tired. So what I heard and what I saw was a vision forward. So I'm very confident that that can happen here. Ironically, my career in transportation continued to move on, and I came back some 20 years later to run the rail and bus in Portland. So I saw the whole kind of continuum as it works. So I really believe in what we're doing here. One other example I also would mention is my experience in Ann Arbor. We were able to create a regional connection between Ypsi and Ypsilanti Township by coming into the authority. We were able to create a new transit center, create more service, get a millage passed, and the workers had better connections to where they want to go. So over the course of the next 5 years, there will be a 44% increase in service in that area. But it was about regionalism, it was about connecting people to jobs, opportunities, hospitals. Even if you don't use public transportation, there are a lot of benefits as a result of that as well. So I'm here to say that we need your support. This is an important topic. It's probably one of the biggest topics. The most important thing that we can do is connecting the region together, and that's what we're working on. We'll be coming back in the next month or so with a more preferred option, up to a month and a half. We're working on data, polling information, where the jobs are. So a lot of this is database driven in terms of how we're approaching this. But we've been out, we've been hearing what people have to say, and we need to get this done by next year. So with that, I'll conclude my remarks. Thank you.